What's up everyone? Today is my best books of 2021. I chose 21 of my favorite books in order to tell you all about them, so let's go ahead and get right into it. Okay, I'm gonna start out with my 5-star reads that I really loved, and then I do have a few 4-star reads sprinkled in at the end. So I'm gonna start out with the first book I actually read in 2021. It ended up being one of my favorites, a 5-star. It was Member of the Family by Diane Lake, and this is a nonfiction memoir about Diane, who was part of the Charles Manson cult. So this book was so amazing, and I love cults. If you love cults, you have to read it. I promise you, it is not boring, even though it's nonfiction. I learned so much about what it's like to be in a cult, about the 60s and 70s. Like, the vibe of this book was so amazing. Oh my gosh, I just loved it. I think I love that time era. It's very dark, disturbing, but like, I mean, obviously so real. Such a good book. I definitely want every single one of you to pick this up. Also, bonus factor, I love when nonfiction books have pictures in them. I don't have actual hard copies of all of my favorite books yet. If you don't know, this is my favorites shelf over here. So I do keep my favorite reads and I unhaul all my other books, but I don't have every single one of them because some of them I might have read from the library or maybe I borrowed them from someone else. And so I am working on just finding like bargain copies so I can put them on my shelf. Next up is If You Tell. Gosh, I swear not every single one of these is nonfiction, but this is a nonfiction true crime book written by Greg Olson, and it was amazing. This is actually kind of a thick book, so I was a little scared going into it, but someone on Instagram was like, hey, I think you have this book, like you need to read it, you're going to love it. And so I picked it up one day. I read it in a whole sitting. I listened to the audiobook for part of it while I was like driving around doing errands, and it was so intriguing. Like, it did not feel like a nonfiction book at all. I had to keep checking and being like, is this actually true? Is this a true story? It is, okay? This is about this lady who was a crazy child, grew up into a crazy adult, and she like abused her children, abused all these people, murdered people. She would lie all the time to get people in trouble. And there was just some of the craziest things I've ever read about. Lots of trigger warnings in here, so definitely do your research. But if you want a true crime that's like not boring, that's incredibly thrilling, that you're gonna be shocked about, this is the one for you. Next up is Every Value Break by Peter Swanson. I also, I think, read this in one day and I loved it. The only problem with this book is that I can't really give you a synopsis because it gives away so much of it, and I think that's one of the reasons why I really loved this book, because I had an ARC copy and there was like no synopsis on it, so I went in almost completely blind, and I think that's why I loved it so much, because other people did read a synopsis and then they ended up not really liking the book. So I think that that is a really big key factor with this book. This book is about this lady who is about to get married, and on her honeymoon she is like kissing this other guy. She's like, whatever, like I'm gonna get married, no one's gonna know about it. She does get married. Anyway, this guy ends up being at her wedding and kind of stalking her, but the story goes way further from there. Like, that is like the first 2 chapters maybe. This book was so thrilling. I gave it to my sister. She absolutely loved reading it, and now I think my sister-in-law has it right now, so that's why I don't have the physical copy, but it is so good. One of my all-time favorite Peter Swanson books. Next up is All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. I loved this book. I can't wait to get my hands on a copy. I actually listened to the audiobook through my library, I believe for the Backlist Readathon. This is a nonfiction memoir. Guys, there is going to be a pattern here in my favorite books of this year, because I realized that memoirs are one of my new favorite genres. So I'm just apologizing in advance, okay? But this is about George. He's Black and queer, and he tells you the story of his life, what it's like growing up in the Black community and the gay community and dealing with all of those different factors. It was very heartbreaking. It was very real, raw, honest. I absolutely loved it, and I learned a lot from it. It's actually a young adult book, but it is written so well. It did not feel like young adult at all. So don't let that like hold you off or anything. This is a must read for everyone. Okay, I have 2 more memoirs I'm gonna talk about, okay? But don't leave this video yet. I promise there's like other good thrillers and stuff in here. But next up, I have Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. Again, I listened to this book. He narrates it. It is so good. I don't know why, but I'm really loving Memoirs. It's just so entertaining. I was listening to it at work, and like Matthew McConaughey was literally making me laugh at work. I was like listening to it and everyone was like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? That's how good this book was. It was so entertaining. I loved knowing more about Matthew McConaughey's life, and even knowing like facts about movies and TV shows that he was in. A lot of that stuff you just don't know unless, I guess, if you're looking it up maybe. Highly recommend, very good. The other memoir that I loved was Elton John's memoir. It's called Me, and I was literally on an Elton John kick for so long. I believe I read this right during the week of the 4th of July, and I could not get enough of Elton John. I loved this book. I believe I listened to it all on audio. Highly recommend, because it's narrated by, oh gosh, I cannot think of his name, but the guy that plays him in the movie Rocket Man. It is so good. And I ended up rewatching the movie 2 more times after I read this book, and went on a whole Elton John music kick for like 2 months straight where I only listened to Elton John. I had it bad, okay, you guys, but it is so worth it. I definitely think I need to read more celebrity memoirs because I like them. Okay, then we got Those Girls by Chevy Stevens. This is not nonfiction. This is not a memoir. We have a fiction book, guys. This is a thriller. It was my first Chevy Stevens book that I read, and I really loved it. This is about 3 sisters that are living with their dad. Their dad is an alcoholic and abusive, and a fight breaks out, something happens, they run away, and they end up getting caught with the wrong crowd. There is lots of torture, rape, trigger warnings in this book, and I really loved the epilogue for this and how this ended. 5 stars, super thrilling, super dark. Definitely give it a read if you are kind of a fan of more of like Karen Slaughter and those types of things. It's not detective-y, but it does have more of that crime thriller, like almost old-timey thriller writing compared to the new like domestic thrillers. So that's why I think fans of Karen Slaughter would like Chevy Stevens. Then we have one of the most thrilling thrillers that I read this year, and it's actually kind of like a romance thriller in my opinion. This is The Arrangement by Kirsten Maudlin. Look how small it is. I will tell you, Kirsten packed this book full of twists and turns and thrills and everything. This is about a wife who realizes that her marriage is like on the brinks of like needing fixed. So she comes up with this arrangement where they both can go out and date other people. There is a rule though where they're not allowed to tell each other like who they're dating or anything that happens on the date, but everything else pretty much goes. Anyway, this book takes a really bad turn. Obviously not all of that is pretty, it doesn't all go right, and this is like in like the thriller genre. Like if you like domestic thrillers, if you like romance thrillers, if you're a romance reader trying to get into thrillers or a thriller reader trying to get into romance, there is lots of relationships, lots of messy drama, murder, I mean lots of different things. Definitely pick this up. It is super fast read. You will not want to put it down. Now, I just talked about this book in my December wrap-up. It was the IVF graphic novel that I read. I actually got this from my library, and like I said in my wrap-up, I loved the representation. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was really great that they even had something like this, because I feel like there's not a lot of information about IVF, so it was fun to have a informational, but still also, you know, just a fictional little story about IVF. And so if you are about to get IVF done, in the middle of getting IVF, know a friend that's getting IVF, definitely read it because it's very informational and I really thought it was cute. Okay, and then I also talked about this book in my December wrap-up. This is one of my favorites of the year. I loved this book so much. This is Saving Noah by Lucinda Berry, but this book is not going to be for everyone. Again, I love these books that are small but pack a huge punch. I listened to most of this on audio and it was very good. This though is about Noah, who is an A-roll honor student, and so he's like this amazing kid, but he actually admits to sexually abusing the 6-year-old girls that he's been coaching for swim team. Obviously right away when you hear that, when you read that, like, you know, you want to hate Noah, but the thing is like this book makes you feel really conflicted because this book is about Noah and his perspective and his mom's perspective. So you get to kind of know like what it's like to be in those situations, but also like the difference between just sexual abuse and pedophilia and all of that stuff. So I learned so much, and I know it sounds awful for me to be like promoting this book and saying, oh, I felt bad for Noah. But if you read it, you'll know what I'm talking about, and I promise it's not a black and white scenario, okay? It's just not. There are gray areas, not good gray areas, but that's just what happens, okay? This book made me feel so many different things. I mean, there were times I wanted to throw up. There were times that I wanted to cry. I love books that make me feel something, but not only that, this book had one of the best endings and twists that I ever had read, and I legit dropped my mouth open when I like figured out what was going on, like at the twist reveal. It's so good. You have to read it, okay? Okay, the next books I'm talking about are technically rated 4.5 stars, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. We have another Lucinda Berry book called The Perfect Child. This was actually my first Lucinda Berry book, and this one is similar to Baby Teeth, or also another book that I'm gonna be talking about that's also in this top favorites. This is a thriller book that is kind of has that evil child dynamic. So it's like a domestic thriller, throw an evil child in the mix, and you got this crazy thriller. But I will say it is way better than Baby Teeth by Zoja Stage. So if you are comparing it to that, do not think it is the same thing. I swear, because I read Baby Teeth a few years ago and I hated it. This one is done so much better. Next up, we have Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. I actually have 2 Tiffany D. Jackson books on this list. She has become one of my favorite authors this year, which is great. Monday's Not Coming is a young adult book, but I feel like there are way more adult topics in this book. This book is actually about a young girl named Monday, and she doesn't come back to school after the summer, and her best friend has been really worried and starts trying to, you know, communicate with adults and figure out where she is. There are a lot of dark things in this book. If you want a young adult to read it, maybe you should read it first just to make sure, because I'm not sure exactly the correct age range for it. It definitely was more dark than I had anticipated, but it has such real and raw topics in it. So I do think it is an important read. Okay, next up, I read Cheat Day by Liv Stratman. I gave this 4.5 stars. This is a romance book, but it's one of my favorites because I love romance books that are emotional, that are about people, you know, around my age. Maybe they're married. I like those types of books instead of the normal romance, you know, where someone's just trying to find a relationship or, you know, everything works out perfectly. This book is about Kit and David, and they were high school sweethearts. They get married and they have this, you know, normal, boring life in the city. It's not anything bad, but Kit is very antsy. She wants to change a lot of her life. She doesn't like her life. She's not happy with it. She doesn't like the normal routines. She tries out a bunch of diets because she's not happy with how she looks, but she ends up having an affair. And that is a big part of this book that made it very interesting to me. I know that some people don't like love triangles, but I actually did like it because I could see this definitely happening in a real life scenario. And then I really loved how Kit was fighting with, like, should she save her marriage? Should she tell her husband about what happened? Like, is she gonna leave her husband? All of that kind of stuff, which is very real and raw. And that's why I really liked it. So let me know what you think if you pick this one up. Next up is Dear Child by Rami Hausman. This is actually a German book and it was translated. I had picked it up at my library, so I don't currently own a copy, but this was a really good read. It was super thrilling. This is about this guy who kidnaps this lady and is playing family with them. So it's like an isolated cabin. It's a survival thriller. It was so spooky and crazy. I love thrillers like this that are definitely like more of the survival, like kidnapping, isolation, that type of thing. So imagine like only being able to go to the bathroom in like a 2-minute period, and you have to wait for like a certain time on the clock for you to do that. So like he didn't let you just do whatever you wanted. You had to like eat at this time and go to the bathroom at this time and do this at this time. crazy. Then we have Playing Nice by J.P. Delaney. This was a super great domestic thriller because it's different than a lot of other domestic thrillers. What would you do if your children were swapped at birth? This is what this is about, but they don't realize it until their children are 2 years old. And by that time, like, how would you even switch them back? You know, you thought your child was your child for 2 whole years. You can't just switch them. This is super crazy. I definitely think that you should pick it up because it made me think and made me like wonder, like, what would you, I don't know, it blows my mind. Very, very good. I definitely want to pick up more by J.P. Delaney. Then we have They Never Learn. I actually read this book just in December, so it was in my December wrap up. I like this book because it was about a female serial killer who kills these men on the college campus. She's a professor, but she kills these guys because they're like raping girls or doing bad things like that. So it definitely has one of those like gray areas of, are you actually rooting for the serial killer? Like, is she actually just, you know, doing a good thing for society, you know? I had a lot of fun. I thought the twists were pretty good and I didn't see them coming, so definitely recommend. All right, another Tiffany G. Jackson book, Grown. I love this cover, so beautiful. This is about a high school girl named Enchanted, and she is a singer who wants to become famous and actually, you know, make a job out of singing. She meets this guy, Corey, who actually is a famous singer, and he kind of takes her under his wing and is like, here, you know, we can get a record label, all that kind of stuff. Little does she know though that he is not a great person. He's ending up using her, abusing her, talks a lot about that, especially from a teenage perspective. And a lot of people said that this reminded them of an actual true story. I believe it might have been like R. Kelly or something like that. I actually don't know anything about that, so I don't know about the comparisons. But if you like that type of story, then you should definitely pick this up. Next up, I have For Better and Worse by Margot Hunt. So this book is about a husband and wife, and the wife is a criminal defense lawyer. And back when she met her husband, they joked about how they could get away with murder. Fast forward to the future, they find out that the principal of the school is sexually assaulting one of the 13-year-old foster boys, but a lot of people think that it's just a lie and the foster boy is just trying to get attention from people. Obviously something crazy happens, and then the criminal defense lawyer, she actually starts contemplating murder, and the rest of the book is like about how she's like gonna go forward with it, set it up, all this stuff, like what she should do wrong, that kind of thing. And I really, really loved that part because it was like, oh, you're not doing that because, oh yeah, that would leave prints, you know, something like that. So I thought that was really, really interesting. And I really liked how this was such a different domestic thriller than a lot of the others. Next up, we have another nonfiction memoir. This is A Stolen Life by J.C. Duggar. This is about a girl back in 1991 who gets kidnapped and is literally kidnapped for 18 years. So I believe she was kidnapped when she was around 10 years old. And then she does not get to escape until she's closer to 30. She ends up having children with her kidnapper. I mean, it is just a crazy story, and I just felt so bad for her and so bad for any other children or adults that are kidnapped and have to live a life like this. Definitely opened my eyes, and I really, really enjoyed this story. All right, then I really enjoyed The Push by Ashley Audrain. This actually is very similar to The Perfect Child by Lucinda Berry that I talked about before, but this definitely takes a more, almost like a nonfiction approach. This has a lot about postpartum depression, and I really appreciate that in this story. Even though I don't have children of my own, I don't know what it's like to go through that, but I thought that that was so important that someone wrote a book or a thriller that had that aspect in it, because I really love realistic things in my book. So this is about a lady who isn't quite sure if she really wants kids. She does end up having a child, and she has no bonding with this child. She thinks that this child hates her, that she's trying to get her. She ends up then having a second child who like she does have a really good bond with. So there's this constant like, is your child actually evil? Are you just dealing with a lot of postpartum depression? Like, it actually is a very, very, very heavy and depressing book. And I was listening to this at work, and I feel like it really affected my mood, and I felt depressed while reading this. So just be careful when you're picking that up, because I definitely feel like I'm not someone that gets triggered by a lot of things. So for it to trigger me, I think that you should be careful, especially if you've dealt with postpartum depression. All right, last but not least, I have Evidence of the Affair by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a novella that I read and I really enjoyed it. It's very, very quick, super easy to read, and just like all the other Taylor Jenkins Reid's books that I love, it's emotional. This book is all written in letters because it's about these two opposite spouses who found out that each of their spouses were cheating on each other, and when they found out, they ended up starting to send correspondence to each other. It's very heartbreaking, and it reminded me a lot of After I Do by Taylor Jenkins Reid, but just a shorter version of it. Although I wish that I could have given this book a full 5 stars, and I think that I could have if it was a longer story. I just felt like it was missing just even more extra stuff, which is why I only gave it 4 stars, but I did really love it, and I do think a lot of others would like it if you have already previously read from Taylor and love her writing style. All right, that is it. That's all of the best books that I read in 2021. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Let me know if you've read any of these and you agree with what I'm saying. As you can see, I really dove into nonfiction memoirs this year, and I really loved a lot of them. So I am hoping that you pick some of them up so you can see what all the hype is about. All right, that's it for this video, and I will see you very soon in another video. Bye, everyone.
I don't wanna stay here, no. Ain't gonna keep it low now. If you wanna go, let's go. Let's wrap it up and hit the road. I just got an awesome vibe, striking the winner post now. Liberty's on my mind. We've taken off, we've left the ground. You gotta understand that we get one chance, one chance.